The waitress leaned close to the mob boss's ear and whispered the words that would shatter his world. Your wife ratted you out. They're in position. What happened next would force two strangers into a dangerous alliance that neither of them saw coming. Tell us your city, hit subscribe, and get ready for today's story. Let's start. But let me take you back to how we got to this moment, when everything Gustavo Romano thought he knew about loyalty and love came crashing down in a single night. 3 hours earlier, Gustavo Romano sat in his favorite booth at De Luca's restaurant, the same corner table where he'd conducted business for the past 15 years. The dim lighting cast shadows across his weathered face, highlighting the silver threading through his dark hair and the intricate tattoos that peeked from beneath his custom-tailored suit cuffs. At 45, he commanded respect with a single glance, but tonight something felt different. Across the restaurant, 23-year-old Flavia Martinez wiped down tables, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, trying to stay invisible. She'd worked at De Luca's for 2 years, long enough to recognize the dangerous men who frequented the establishment, long enough to know when to look away. But tonight, she couldn't help but notice the tension radiating from the man in the corner booth. Gustavo kept checking his phone, his jaw clenched, amber eyes scanning the room like a predator sensing a trap. Another whiskey, Mr. Romano? Flavia asked quietly, approaching his table with practiced caution. Yeah, make it a double. Gustavo's voice was gravelly, tired. He'd been waiting for his wife Leah for over an hour, something that never happened. She was always punctual, always where she said she'd be. As Flavia turned to go, Gustavo's phone buzzed. The text message was from Leah. Running late. Baby, start dinner without me. Love you. Something cold settled in Gustavo's chest. Leah never called him baby in text messages. She saved those endearments for when they were alone, when her fingers traced the scars on his chest and whispered promises against his skin. Flavia returned with his drink, setting it down carefully. She'd learned to read the moods of dangerous men, and right now Gustavo Romano looked like a man on the edge of violence. Thank you, he murmured, downing half the whiskey in one gulp. The restaurant's back door opened, and Flavia's blood ran cold. 3 men in expensive suits entered, moving with the quiet confidence of predators. She recognized one of them immediately, Marcus Romano, Gustavo's younger brother, a man whose reputation for cruelty made even hardened criminals nervous. What made her stomach drop was seeing Leah Romano slip through the same door moments later, her blonde hair gleaming under the restaurant's lights, her red dress hugging her curves like liquid fire. But she wasn't moving toward her husband's table. Instead, she joined Marcus and his men at a booth on the opposite side of the restaurant. Flavia watched in horror as Leah leaned close to Marcus, her hand resting intimately on his arm as they whispered together. The way Marcus's fingers traced Leah's wrist, the way she smiled at him, it was the smile of lovers, not in-laws. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The late nights Leah claimed to be at her sister's house. The new jewelry she explained away as gifts from generous clients at her boutique. The way she'd been encouraging Gustavo to trust Marcus with more family business. Flavia's hands shook as she processed what she was witnessing. This wasn't just an affair, this was a setup. Marcus was planning something, and Leah was helping him. She glanced back at Gustavo, still waiting for his wife, completely unaware that betrayal sat 30 feet away, wearing the face of family and love. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. Flavia couldn't hear the words, but she saw Leah nod and stand, smoothing down her dress. She was preparing to leave, probably to create an alibi while Marcus and his men moved against Gustavo. The realization hit Flavia like a physical blow. Whatever was happening, it was happening tonight, right now. And Gustavo Romano, for all his power and reputation, was sitting here like a lamb waiting for slaughter. She thought of her grandmother's words. Sometimes, Micah, you have to choose between safety and what's right. Flavia made her choice. Flavia's heart hammered against her ribs as she approached Gustavo's table, her palms sweating around the coffee pot she carried as cover. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to pretend she hadn't seen anything, to let fate run its course. But the image of Leah's cold smile as she whispered to Marcus burned in her mind. Mr. Romano, she said quietly, refilling his coffee cup with hands that trembled only slightly. I need to tell you something important. Gustavo looked up, his amber eyes focused and alert. In his world, information was currency, and the tremor in the young waitress's voice told him this wasn't about the dinner special. What is it? His voice was barely above a whisper, but the authority in it made Flavia's spine straighten. "Your wife," Flavia began, then stopped, the magnitude of what she was about to say hitting her fully. She was about to destroy a marriage, possibly start a war, definitely put herself in mortal danger. Gustavo's eyes narrowed. "What about my wife?" Flavia glanced around the restaurant, making sure no one was watching, then leaned closer. "She's here, with your brother. They're planning something against you." The change in Gustavo was immediate and terrifying. The tired businessman facade melted away, revealing the predator beneath. His hand moved to his jacket, where Flavia knew he kept a gun, and his eyes went cold as winter steel. "Where?" The single word carried the promise of violence. "Back booth, by the kitchen," Flavia whispered. "They've been here for 20 minutes. She came in through the back door with 3 men. Gustavo's jaw clenched so hard, Flavia heard his teeth grind. Without looking, he knew exactly who those 3 men were. Marcus's most trusted killers, men who'd grown up in the Romano organization, men who'd taken orders from Gustavo their entire adult lives. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Marcus wasn't just his brother, he was his blood, his right hand, the one person Gustavo had trusted above all others, and Leah beautiful, sweet Leah, who'd sworn to love him until death parted them. "How long have you known?" Gustavo's voice was deadly calm. "I just saw them together now," Flavia said quickly. The way she touched him, the way they whispered, it's not the first time they've been close. Gustavo nodded slowly, his mind already calculating options, exits, weapons. In the reflection of the restaurant's window, he could see Marcus's table, could see Leah's golden head bent close to his brother's dark one. "You need to leave," he told Flavia. "Now. Go out the front door, get in your car and drive home. Don't look back." "What about you?" The question slipped out before Flavia could stop it. Something that might have been a smile ghosted across Gustavo's features. "I'm going to have a family reunion." Flavia's blood turned to ice. "They'll kill you. There are 4 of them." "Maybe." Gustavo finished his whiskey, his movements controlled and precise. "But I didn't survive 15 years at the top of this organization by backing down from a fight." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a roll of bills, placing several hundreds on the table. "This is for you, for warning me, for giving me a chance." "I don't want money," Flavia said, surprised by her own boldness. Gustavo looked at her then, really looked, seeing past the uniform and nervous demeanor to the courage underneath. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to be smart about this," she said. "Don't walk into their trap. Make them come to you." It was advice that could have come from one of his most trusted advisors. Coming from a 23-year-old waitress, it was either naive foolishness or unexpected wisdom. "What's your name?" Gustavo asked. "Flavia Martinez." "Flavia Martinez," he repeated, committing it to memory the way he did with all important information. "I won't forget what you did tonight." Before she could respond, Gustavo stood and walked calmly toward the restroom, his movements unhurried but purposeful. Flavia watched him go, her heart in her throat, knowing she'd just changed the course of all their lives. In the back booth, Marcus checked his watch and nodded to his men. It was time. 2 days later, Flavia's world exploded. She was walking to her second job at the flower shop, earbuds in, lost in music, when the black Mercedes pulled up beside her. 3 men got out with the smooth efficiency of practiced predators. Before she could scream, before she could run, strong hands grabbed her arms and pushed her into the back seat. "Don't make a sound," one of them warned, his voice carrying the flat menace of a man who'd hurt people for a living. Flavia's throat closed with terror as she recognized where they were taking her, the warehouse district, where whispered rumors said people went to disappear. Her mind raced with images of what they might do to her, of how long it would take someone to find her body. The car stopped outside a decrepit building that looked abandoned from the street. Inside, however, it had been converted into an elegant office space, all leather and dark wood and expensive art, that couldn't quite mask the smell of fear and violence that permeated the air. Leah Romano sat behind a massive desk, but she bore little resemblance to the nervous wife Flavia had seen at the restaurant. This woman was pure predator, her blonde hair sleek and perfect, her red lips curved in a smile that never reached her ice-blue eyes. At 25, she possessed a beauty that could stop traffic and a ruthlessness that could stop hearts. "Flavia Martinez," Leah's voice was silk over steel, "the little waitress who likes to stick her nose where it doesn't belong." "I don't know what you're talking about," Flavia managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. Leah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Really? You don't remember whispering in my husband's ear 2 nights ago? You don't remember ruining months of careful planning? The truth hit Flavia like a physical blow. Gustavo had survived. Whatever trap they'd set for him, he'd escaped it. And now they blamed her. He's not your husband anymore, Flavia said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. You forfeited that when you betrayed him with his own brother. Leah's smile vanished. She stood and walked around the desk, her heels clicking ominously on the concrete floor. You stupid little girl. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? What you've cost us? I cost you nothing you didn't already throw away yourself. The slap came so fast Flavia didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek burning, but she kept her eyes on Leah's face. Gustavo escaped that night because of you, Leah hissed. 3 of my men are dead because of you. My brother-in-law Marcus is in hiding because of you. So they'd tried to kill Gustavo at the restaurant. Flavia felt a surge of savage satisfaction that they'd failed. And now, Leah continued, you're going to help me fix this mess. I'm not helping you with anything. Leah pulled a phone from her purse and showed Flavia the screen. It was a photo of her grandmother's house, clearly taken that morning. An old woman in a floral housecoat was visible through the kitchen window, watering plants on the windowsill. Your grandmother Rosa is lovely, Leah said conversationally. 87 years old, lives alone, has terrible arthritis. It would be such a shame if something happened to her. The blood drained from Flavia's face. You leave her alone. That depends entirely on you. Leah sat on the edge of the desk, her position deliberately casual and menacing. You're going to call Gustavo. You're going to tell him you have information about Marcus's location. You're going to arrange to meet him, so you can kill him. So I can finish what I started. Leah's mask slipped, revealing the vicious hatred underneath. Gustavo Romano has ruled this city for 15 years. It's time for new leadership, younger leadership, leadership that understands how to adapt to changing times. Why? Flavia asked. Why betray him? Why throw away everything? For a moment, something like pain flickered in Leah's eyes. Because I was never anything more than a trophy to him, a beautiful accessory to make him look complete. Marcus sees me as an equal, as a partner. Marcus sees you as a tool, Flavia said quietly. And when he's done using you to get rid of his brother, what do you think happens to you? Leah's face went white with rage. Make the call. One of the men handed Flavia a burner phone with a number already dialed. Her finger hovered over the call button, her mind racing through options, all of them bad. My grandmother, she said, will live a long, happy life if you cooperate. Will have a very unfortunate accident if you don't. Flavia closed her eyes, thought of the man who'd looked at her with unexpected respect 2 nights ago, thought of her grandmother's warm smile and gentle hands. She pressed call. The phone rang twice before Gustavo's familiar voice answered. Who is this? It's Flavia Martinez, the waitress from DeLuca's. A pause. How did you get this number? Flavia's eyes flicked to Leah, who was watching with predatory intensity. I need to see you. I have information about your brother. What kind of information? His voice was carefully neutral, but Flavia could hear the underlying tension. About where he's hiding, about his plans. She tried to inject urgency into her voice without making it sound fake. I can't talk over the phone. It's not safe. Another pause, longer this time. Where? Leah held up a piece of paper with an address written in elegant handwriting. The old shipping warehouse on Pier 47. 1 hour. Alone, Gustavo said, and it wasn't a question. Yes. The word felt like swallowing glass. Flavia. His voice softened. Are you in trouble? The kindness in his question almost broke her. Here was a man who barely knew her, asking about her welfare while she was leading him into a trap. Just come, please. The line went dead. Leah smiled with satisfaction and gestured to her men. Take her to the pier, make sure she's visible when he arrives. The moment he's in position, kill them both. Both? Flavia's blood turned to ice. Did you think you were going to walk away from this? Leah's laugh was genuinely amused. You know too much, little girl. You've seen too much. The only question is whether you die quickly or slowly. As the men dragged her toward the door, Flavia's mind raced. She had maybe 45 minutes before Gustavo arrived. 45 minutes to figure out how to warn him without getting her grandmother killed. The pier was exactly what she'd expected. Isolated, shadowy, with dozens of places for snipers to hide. They positioned her near the water's edge, visible from the road, An obvious trap that any intelligent person would spot immediately, which meant Gustavo Romano was either not as smart as his reputation suggested, or he was walking into this trap knowing exactly what it was. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it gave her an unexpected surge of hope. 20 minutes later, headlights appeared at the end of the pier. A single black car moved slowly through the darkness, its engine purring with expensive precision. It stopped about 50 feet away, and the driver's door opened. Gustavo Romano stepped out, but he wasn't alone. As he walked toward her, Flavia caught glimpses of movement in the shadows behind him, his own men, positioning themselves with the quiet efficiency of professionals. He'd brought backup, which meant he'd suspected the trap all along, which meant he'd come anyway. The realization hit her like lightning. He'd come knowing it was a trap because she'd asked him to, because 2 nights ago she'd risked her life to save his. "Flavia," his voice carried across the water as he approached. "Are you hurt?" "I'm sorry," she called back, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." "I know," he said simply, continuing to walk toward her. "I know you're sorry." 50 feet away. 50. 40. 30. The first shot came from the rooftop of an adjacent building. The muzzle flashed bright against the darkness. But Gustavo was already moving, diving toward Flavia, as his own men returned fire from positions they'd taken while everyone was focused on the dramatic approach. The night exploded into chaos. Gustavo hit Flavia like a linebacker, driving her down behind a concrete barrier, just as bullets chewed up the pier where she'd been standing. His body covered hers completely, solid muscle and expensive fabric, the scent of his cologne mixing with the smell of gunpowder and salt water. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice calm despite the war zone erupting around them. "Whatever they threatened you with, I'll handle it." "My grandmother," Flavia gasped against his chest. "They have photos of my grandmother." Gustavo's arms tightened around her. "Address." "What?" "Your grandmother's address." "Now." Flavia rattled off the street number, her words barely audible over the sound of automatic weapons fire. Gustavo pulled out his phone and barked rapid commands in Italian. Within 30 seconds, he'd dispatched a full security team to protect an old woman he'd never met, simply because she mattered to Flavia. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. "All clear, boss," a voice called from the darkness. Gustavo helped Flavia to her feet, his hands gentle but impersonal as he checked her for injuries. "You're bleeding." Flavia looked down and saw blood seeping through her shirt sleeve. She hadn't even felt the bullet graze. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His fingers probed the wound with surprising gentleness. "We need to get you medical attention." "What about Leah, about Marcus?" Gustavo's expression went arctic. "What about them? They're still out there. They'll try again." "Let them try." The confidence in his voice was absolute. "They had one chance to take me by surprise. They wasted it." As his men emerged from the shadows, Flavia got her first real look at Gustavo's operation. These weren't thugs or street soldiers. They moved with military precision, communicated in hand signals, cleared the area with professional efficiency. Whatever Gustavo Romano was, he commanded loyalty and competence in equal measure. "Sir," one of them approached, "we found 3 bodies on the adjacent rooftop. No survivors. And the woman? Gone. Vehicle tracks suggest she left before the shooting started. So Leah had run, leaving her men to die while she escaped to fight another day." Somehow Flavia wasn't surprised. Gustavo turned back to her, his amber eyes unreadable in the pier's sparse lighting. "Why did you agree to set me up?" The question was asked without judgment, simple curiosity mixed with professional interest. "They threatened my grandmother," Flavia said. "They had photos of her house, knew her routine. I couldn't let anything happen to her. And yet you tried to warn me anyway. Had she?" Flavia thought back to the phone call, to the subtle desperation she'd tried to inject into her voice. "You knew it was a trap. From the moment you said Marcus's name." Gustavo pulled out a handkerchief and pressed it gently against her wounded arm. "My brother hasn't spoken to me in 6 months. If you had real information about his location, it wouldn't have come through a waitress he's never met." "Then why did you come?" Gustavo was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still pressed against her arm, stopping the bleeding with practiced efficiency. "Because you saved my life 2 nights ago. Because you could have kept quiet and stayed safe, but you chose to warn a dangerous stranger instead." His eyes met hers in the darkness. "Because I don't abandon people who've risked themselves for me." The simple statement sent warmth spreading through Flavia's chest. When was the last time someone had protected her instead of the other way around? When had anyone considered her worth risking their life for? "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I take you somewhere safe while I handle my family problems." Gustavo's voice carried promise and threat in equal measure. "And you tell me everything you know about my wife's plans." As they walked toward his car, Flavia realized her life had just changed completely. She was no longer a waitress trying to stay invisible, no longer someone who could pretend dangerous men didn't exist. She'd chosen a side in a war she didn't understand, and there was no going back. But as Gustavo's hand settled protectively on her lower back, guiding her toward safety, she found she didn't want to go back. For the first time in her life, someone was protecting her instead of the other way around. Someone was choosing her safety over their own convenience. It was terrifying. It was dangerous. It was everything she'd never known she wanted. 1 week later, Flavia woke up in a world she never could have imagined. The penthouse suite overlooking Central Park bore no resemblance to her cramped studio apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city sprawling below, while original paintings worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime adorned walls of cream-colored marble. Even the bathroom was larger than her grandmother's entire living room, but luxury couldn't erase the reality of her situation. Armed guards stood outside her door 24 hours a day. Every window was bulletproof. Every entrance was monitored. She was protected, yes, but also imprisoned. "Good morning," Gustavo's voice came from the doorway. Flavia turned from the window where she'd been watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. He stood leaning against the frame, already dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her grandmother's monthly rent. Despite the early hour, he looked perfectly alert, perfectly dangerous. "Did you sleep?" she asked. Something flickered in his amber eyes. "Sleep is a luxury I can't afford right now." Over the past week, she'd learned that Gustavo operated on perhaps 3 hours of sleep per night. He spent his days orchestrating a careful war against his brother and estranged wife, tracking their movements, cutting off their resources, slowly tightening a noose that would eventually strangle their rebellion. "Any word about my grandmother?" "Rosa is safe," Gustavo assured her, moving into the room with that predatory grace that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "My men report she's enjoying having bodyguards. Apparently she's teaching them to play poker and they're losing badly." Despite everything, Flavia smiled. That sounded exactly like her grandmother. "When can I see her?" Gustavo's expression grew serious. "When Marcus and Leah are no longer a threat." "And when will that be?" "Soon." The single word carried promise and menace in equal measure. Flavia studied his face, noting the tension around his eyes, the tight line of his jaw. "You found something." "Marcus made a mistake last night. He tried to recruit soldiers from the Torino family." Gustavo moved to the window, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "The Torinos have been loyal to me for 20 years. They reported the meeting immediately." "What does that mean?" "It means Marcus is getting desperate, running out of allies." Gustavo turned to face her, his proximity making her breath catch. Desperate men make sloppy mistakes. They stood there for a moment, the morning light catching the silver in his dark hair, highlighting the sharp angles of his cheekbones. Flavia had noticed everything about this man over the past week, how he took his coffee black, how he unconsciously touched the scar on his left wrist when he was thinking, how his entire demeanor softened when he spoke to her grandmother during their daily check-in calls. "Why are you protecting me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You know why. I know what you told me, that you don't abandon people who've helped you. But there's something else." Gustavo was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "How you see me as human," he said simply. "In a world where people either fear me or want to use me, you look at me like I'm just a man. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The honesty in his admission made her chest tight. "You are just a man." "I'm a killer, Flavia. I've taken more lives than you've saved tips at that restaurant. And you've also protected more people than you've hurt. You've built schools, funded hospitals, kept entire neighborhoods safe from worse predators." She moved closer, close enough to see the surprise in his eyes. "I've spent this week watching you, Gustavo. I've seen how your men look at you, not with fear, but with respect, with loyalty. You don't know what I'm capable of. Then show me." The challenge hung between them like a live wire. Gustavo's eyes darkened, and for a moment Flavia saw the predator beneath the expensive suits and careful control. "You want to see my world?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Tonight, Marcus is meeting with potential allies at a warehouse in Queens. I'm going to remind him why crossing family is the last mistake he'll ever make. Take me with you." "Absolutely not. I'm already in this." "Gustavo, I'm already a target. I might as well understand what I'm fighting." Gustavo stared at her for a long moment, and she could practically see him calculating risks, weighing options. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "You stay in the car. You do exactly what I tell you. And if things go wrong, you run." "I don't run." "For me, you will." The way he said it, not an order but a request, a plea, made something warm unfurl in her chest. That night, as they sat in the shadows outside a Queens warehouse, watching Marcus's men patrol the perimeter, Flavia began to understand the true scope of Gustavo's power. 12 men, Gustavo murmured, lowering the binoculars, all armed, all professionals. They'd been watching the warehouse for 2 hours, cataloguing every guard rotation, every entrance, every potential escape route. Flavia sat in the passenger seat of the armored Mercedes, trying not to think about how many laws she was probably breaking just by being here. "How many men do you have?" she whispered. 8. Gustavo's voice was calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather rather than a potential massacre. "That's not good odds. Numbers don't win wars, Flavia. Strategy does." He pulled out his phone and sent a series of text messages. "In 10 minutes, the power grid for this block will experience a mysterious failure. In the darkness, my men will take positions. Marcus will be forced to either run like a coward or face me. And if he runs..." Gustavo's smile was arctic. "I know where he lives." As if on cue, the warehouse went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on briefly, then died as well. Shouts erupted from inside the building, the sound of men scrambling to understand what had happened. "Stay here," Gustavo ordered, checking the gun at his waist. "No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, you stay in this car." "Gustavo." He paused, hand on the door handle. "Come back," she said quietly. Something soft flickered in his eyes. "Count on it." He disappeared into the darkness with the fluid grace of a predator born for violence. Flavia sat alone in the car, her heart hammering against her ribs, counting the seconds and trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. The first gunshot came exactly 7 minutes later. Then chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like deadly fireworks. Windows exploded in the warehouse. Men screamed orders in English and Italian. The night air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and fear. Flavia gripped the door handle, every instinct screaming at her to run, to get as far away from this violence as possible. But she'd promised to stay, and Gustavo Romano was in there somewhere, fighting a war she'd helped start. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence stretched like a held breath. Then footsteps approached the car, multiple sets, moving with purposeful precision. Flavia's blood turned to ice as she realized she couldn't tell if the approaching men were friends or enemies. The driver's door opened, and Gustavo slid behind the wheel. Even in the darkness, she could see blood on his knuckles, a tear in his expensive jacket. But he was alive, he was moving, he was here. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Not yet." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Marcus wasn't there." "What do you mean he wasn't there?" "I mean my dear brother sent his men to die while he hid somewhere safe." Gustavo started the engine, his movements sharp with controlled fury. "But I found something interesting." He handed her a cell phone, its screen cracked but still functional. "One of Marcus's lieutenants had this. Look at the recent calls." Flavia scrolled through the call log, her blood turning to ice as she recognized one number that appeared repeatedly. "This is my work number. At the restaurant. Someone's been calling your workplace 3 times a day for the past week." The implication hit her like a physical blow. "They're looking for me." "More than that." Gustavo's jaw clenched. "They're looking for leverage. Your co-workers, your manager, anyone who might know where you've gone." Flavia thought of Maria, the older waitress who'd trained her when she started at DeLuca's, of Tony, the cook who always saved her the best pieces of bread, of Mr. DeLuca himself, who'd hired her when she desperately needed work. "We have to warn them." "I already have." "But Flavia," Gustavo's voice grew serious, "this changes things. Marcus isn't just hunting me anymore. He's hunting you specifically. Why, I'm nobody. Gustavo pulled the car to the curb and turned to face her fully. In the glow of the streetlights, his expression was intense, almost vulnerable. "You're not nobody," he said quietly. "You're the woman who saved my life. You're the woman who's been living in my home, eating at my table, making me remember what it feels like to have someone to protect instead of something to fear." Flavia's breath caught. "Gustavo, Marcus knows I care about you," he continued, his voice rough. "In his mind, that makes you a weakness he can exploit." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Gustavo cared about her, not just as an asset or a responsibility, but as a woman, as someone who mattered to him personally. "So what do? We end this." The steel in his voice was absolute. "Tomorrow night, Marcus is meeting with potential allies from Chicago, men who don't know our family history, who might actually be stupid enough to back him. Another trap." "No." Gustavo's smile was sharp as a blade. "Tomorrow night, I'm going to offer my brother exactly what he's always wanted: a chance to face me, alone, without armies or politics or family complications. A duel? A reckoning." Gustavo reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers gentle despite the violence they'd just committed. "And after tomorrow night, you'll be free to live whatever life you choose." The promise should have filled her with relief. Instead, it felt like loss. Because somewhere over the past week, surrounded by luxury and danger in equal measure, protected by a man who commanded empires with a whispered word, Flavia had stopped thinking about the life she used to want. The next evening, Flavia stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the emerald green dress Gustavo had insisted she wear to Marcus's meeting. The silk clung to her curves like liquid fire, while diamonds borrowed from his private collection sparkled at her throat and ears. "You look beautiful," Gustavo said from the doorway, but his voice carried none of its usual warmth. Tonight, he was all business, every inch the Mafia boss preparing for war. "I still don't understand why I need to be there," Flavia said, turning to face him. Gustavo moved into the room, devastating in a black suit that emphasized his dangerous elegance. "Because Marcus expects me to come alone. He'll be suspicious if I show up without any emotional investment. But if I bring the woman I'm protecting, the woman he's been hunting, I become the proof that you care more about my safety than strategic advantage." "Exactly." Gustavo stopped in front of her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "But there's something you need to know before we walk into this." The seriousness in his tone made her stomach clench. "What?" "The meeting location. It's at the Astoria Hotel, penthouse suite." His amber eyes grew dark. "The same hotel where Marcus took Leah for their first secret meeting 6 months ago." The significance hit her immediately. This wasn't just about power or territory. This was personal, a final confrontation in the place where his brother's betrayal had begun. "He chose it deliberately," she said, "to remind me how completely I was fooled, how thoroughly my own family played me for a fool." Gustavo's hands tightened fractionally on her shoulders. "But he made one mistake." "What?" "He assumes I'm the same man I was 6 months ago, the man who trusted blindly, who never saw betrayal coming." Gustavo's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "He's about to learn how wrong he is." 30 minutes later, they stood outside the penthouse suite, Gustavo's hand resting protectively on Flavia's lower back. She could feel the tension radiating from him, coiled violence barely contained beneath expensive fabric and careful control. "Remember," he murmured against her ear, "whatever happens in there, you stay close to me. You don't speak unless I give you permission. And if I tell you to run, you don't hesitate." Before Flavia could respond, the door opened. Marcus Romano stood in the threshold, and the family resemblance was immediately apparent. The same dark hair, the same amber eyes, the same dangerous magnetism. But where Gustavo carried himself with controlled authority, Marcus radiated a different kind of menace, something wilder and more desperate. "Brother?" Marcus smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "How good of you to accept my invitation. How good of you to finally grow the courage to face me directly." They entered the suite, and Flavia's breath caught. The space was opulent beyond imagination, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline, antique furniture worth more than most people's houses, artwork that belonged in museums. And in the center of it all, wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination, stood Leah Romano. Gustavo's estranged wife had only grown more beautiful over the months of separation. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, her blue eyes sparkled with malicious intelligence, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Hello, husband," Leah purred, her voice honey over poison. "So you look well. Protecting strays suits you." Gustavo's arm tightened around Flavia's waist, pulling her closer against his side. "Leah, still playing the whore, I see." The insult hit its mark. Leah's perfect composure cracked for just a moment, revealing the fury underneath. "Careful, Gustavo," Marcus warned, moving to stand beside Leah. "You're outnumbered here." "Am I?" Gustavo's smile was arctic. "I count one brother who's forgotten his place, one unfaithful wife who's outlived her usefulness, and whoever you've hired as backup hidden in the adjoining rooms." The accuracy of his assessment clearly unsettled Marcus. "You always were too clever for your own good. Not clever enough to see your betrayal coming," Gustavo admitted, "but clever enough to survive it." "Survive it?" Leah laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "You call hiding behind waitresses and bodyguards survival? You call losing half your territory to Marcus's superior leadership survival?" Flavia felt Gustavo tense beside her, but his voice remained level. "What do you want, Marcus?" "What I've always wanted," his brother replied. "Recognition, respect, my fair share of what our father built. Our father built this empire for the eldest son, for me. Our father built it for the strongest son, the smartest son, the son capable of leading it into the future." Marcus's voice grew harder. "You've been coasting on reputation and fear for too long, Gustavo. The families are starting to notice your weaknesses." "What families?" The question was asked with deceptive calm. Marcus gestured toward the windows. "The Torrentis have agreed to support my leadership. The Morettis are considering it. Even the old guard is beginning to see that it's time for change." "Interesting," Gustavo said conversationally, "because I had dinner with Vincent Torrenti yesterday. He sends his regards. Also, his assurance that anyone claiming to speak for his family is lying." The color drained from Marcus's face. "And the Morettis," Gustavo continued. "Their loyalty was purchased 20 years ago when I saved their youngest son from a kidnapping. They're not interested in new arrangements." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Gustavo pulled out his phone and played a brief audio message. Vincent Torrenti's gravelly voice filled the room. "Gustavo, that little snake of a brother came sniffing around again. Want me to handle it permanently? Or you still got family feelings about this?" The message ended, leaving deadly silence in its wake. Leah was the first to break it, her voice sharp with desperation. "Enough games. We didn't bring you here to negotiate." "Then why?" Gustavo asked, though Flavia suspected he already knew the answer. Marcus smiled, and suddenly his resemblance to his brother vanished. Where Gustavo was predator, Marcus was poison. Where Gustavo was strength, Marcus was cunning. "We brought you here to watch," he said simply. That's when Flavia noticed the laptop computer on the marble coffee table, its screen facing away from them. Marcus turned it around with theatrical flourish, revealing a live video feed. Flavia's heart stopped. On the laptop screen, her grandmother Rosa sat tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. The old woman's face was bruised, her floral housecoat torn, but her eyes blazed with defiant fury even through the fear. "You bastards!" Flavia breathed, lunging toward the computer before Gustavo's iron grip stopped her. "Easy, Bella," he murmured, but she could feel the tension in his body, the barely controlled rage radiating from him like heat. "Surprised?" Leah's laugh was triumphant. "Your precious bodyguards were good, Gustavo, but not good enough." On screen, a figure moved into frame, a man in a black mask holding a gun. Rosa flinched, but didn't make a sound, maintaining the dignity that had carried her through 87 years of hardship. "Here's how this works," Marcus said, his voice all business now. "You're going to transfer control of the Romano family assets to me, all of them. The legitimate businesses, the offshore accounts, the property holdings, everything. And if I refuse," Gustavo's voice was deadly calm, "then the old woman dies slowly while your little waitress watches. Then we kill her too. Then we hunt down every person you've ever cared about and eliminate them one by one." Flavia felt Gustavo's body go absolutely still beside her, the kind of predatory stillness that preceded explosive violence. "You made one mistake," he said quietly. "What's that?" Marcus scoffed. "You assumed I came here unprepared." Gustavo pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. Immediately the video feed on the laptop changed. Instead of Rosa tied to a chair, the screen now showed the same warehouse from a different angle, one revealing a dozen armed men surrounding the building. What? Leah grabbed the laptop, frantically typing commands. That's impossible. Your men took my grandmother 3 hours ago, Gustavo said conversationally. My men found the location 2 hours and 59 minutes ago. Rosa has been in protective custody ever since. On screen, the man in the black mask pulled off his covering, revealing the face of Gustavo's most trusted lieutenant. He winked at the camera and gave a cheerful wave. But that's not possible, Marcus stammered. We watched them take her. We have proof. You have theater, Gustavo corrected. Rosa volunteered to be bait once she learned her granddaughter was in danger. Apparently, she's tougher than both of us combined. Flavia's heart swelled with pride and terror in equal measure. Of course, her grandmother would do something so reckless and brave. Leah was frantically dialing numbers on her phone, growing more desperate with each failed connection. None of our men are responding. That's because they're dead, Gustavo said simply. All of them. You've been sitting here gloating over fake video footage while I systematically dismantled every aspect of your little rebellion. The change in Marcus was immediate and terrifying. The civilized facade melted away, revealing something feral and desperate underneath. He pulled a gun from his jacket with shaking hands. You think you're so smart, he snarled. You think you've won, but I've still got this. He pointed the weapon at Flavia's chest, his finger tightening on the trigger. Kill me, and she dies too. Let me walk out of here, and maybe I'll let her live. Gustavo shifted slightly, placing himself partially between Flavia and the gun. You won't shoot her. Why not? Because you're not a killer, Marcus. You're a schemer, a manipulator, a coward who hides behind other people's violence, but you've never pulled a trigger yourself. You want to bet her life on that? Gustavo's smile was sharp as winter. I already have. The movement was so fast Flavia barely saw it. One moment Marcus was holding a gun on her. The next he was on the ground, his weapon skittering across the marble floor. Gustavo stood over him, his own pistol pressed against his brother's temple. The only question now, Gustavo said quietly, is whether you die quickly or slowly. Please, Marcus gasped, all his arrogance evaporating. I'm your brother. No, Gustavo's voice carried final judgment. My brother died the moment he betrayed our family. You're just a stranger wearing his face. Leah screamed and lunged for the fallen weapon, but Flavia was faster. The waitress, who'd spent years dodging grabbing hands and breaking up restaurant fights, moved with surprising grace, kicking the gun under the couch before Leah could reach it. It's over, Flavia said, looking into Leah's hate-filled eyes. It's finally over. But even as she said the words, Flavia saw Leah's hand moving towards something concealed beneath her dress. A backup weapon, small but deadly. Time slowed as the blonde woman pulled out a silver pistol, her face twisted with rage and desperation. The gun came up toward Gustavo's unprotected back. Flavia didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself between them, just as Leah pulled the trigger. The bullet caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into Gustavo's arms. Pain exploded through her body, but all she could think about was the man holding her, the way his eyes went wide with terror and fury. No, Gustavo whispered, his hands already applying pressure to the wound. No, no, no. The last thing Flavia saw before darkness claimed her was Gustavo's face, beautiful and terrible in its rage, as he turned toward his brother and estranged wife with murder in his eyes. Flavia woke up in what was clearly the best private hospital room money could buy. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked Central Park, while machines beeped quietly around her, monitoring vital signs and dispensing medication through an IV line. Her shoulder ached fiercely, but she was alive. More importantly, the warm hand wrapped around her fingers told her she wasn't alone. Hey! Gustavo's voice was rough with exhaustion and relief. He sat in a chair beside her bed, still wearing the same black suit from the night before, though it was now wrinkled and blood-stained. How long? She managed, her throat dry as sand. 14 hours. You lost a lot of blood, but the doctor says you'll make a full recovery. His amber eyes were bloodshot, dark circles beneath them, speaking of a sleepless night spent waiting. Rosa's been here the whole time too. She just went down to get coffee. Marcus, Leah. Something dark flickered across Gustavo's features. No longer a problem. The finality in his voice told her everything she needed to know. She should probably feel guilty about that, should mourn the loss of human life even under these circumstances. Instead, she felt only relief that the threat was finally gone. What happens now? She asked. Gustavo was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles across her knuckles. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "I mean you've saved my life twice now. You've risked everything to protect me and the people I care about. You've proven yourself braver than soldiers I've known, more loyal than family." His voice grew softer. "And I've fallen in love with you somewhere along the way." Flavia's heart stopped, then began racing double time. "Gustavo, I know it's insane," he continued. "I know we barely know each other. That this whole thing started with violence and threats and circumstances neither of us chose." He lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "But I also know that when I thought I might lose you last night, something inside me broke. I know that you're the first person in years who's made me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond mere survival." Tears pricked at Flavia's eyes. "I love you too." The words slipped out before she could analyze them, before she could weigh the consequences or consider the obstacles. They were simply true, as fundamental and undeniable as breathing. Gustavo's face transformed, relief and joy, and something deeper flooding his features. "Yeah? Yeah." She reached up with her uninjured arm and cupped his cheek, feeling the roughness of stubble beneath her palm. "I love that you cried when you thought I was dying. I love that you spent a fortune protecting a grandmother you'd never met just because she mattered to me. Flavia, I love that you're gentle with old ladies and waitresses, but absolutely terrifying to anyone who threatens the people you care about." She smiled through the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I love you, Gustavo Romano, all of you, the tender man and the dangerous one." He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promises. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "That's not a question. Marry me." This time his voice carried hope and vulnerability in equal measure. "Yes," the answer came without hesitation. "But I have conditions." Gustavo laughed, the sound lighter than she'd ever heard it. "Name them." "My grandmother lives with us. No negotiation. Done. I want to go back to school, finish my nursing degree. I'll fund the best program in the country, and I want to be involved in your legitimate businesses. The hospitals, the schools, the community development projects." She met his eyes steadily. "I want to build something good together." "Building something good," Gustavo repeated, his smile soft and wondering. "I like the sound of that." The door opened, and Rosa Martinez entered carrying a tray of coffee and what looked like homemade cookies. At 87, Flavia's grandmother was barely 5 feet tall, but she'd clearly charmed every nurse and doctor on the floor during her vigil. "Finally awake, mi amor," Rosa said, setting down the tray and moving to kiss Flavia's forehead. "This man of yours, he hasn't left your side for even a minute, grandmother." "Meet Gustavo Romano," Flavia said formally. "Gustavo, my grandmother Rosa Martinez." "We've met," Rosa said with a twinkle in her eye. "He's been asking for my permission to marry you for the past 6 hours. "And?" Flavia looked between them. "I told him if he makes you happy and keeps you safe, he has my blessing." Rosa patted Gustavo's cheek with maternal affection. "But if he hurts you, I know where he sleeps now." The threat, delivered in Rosa's gentle voice while offering him cookies, made Gustavo laugh out loud. "Yes, ma'am," he said solemnly. "I'll remember that." 6 months later, Flavia stood in the garden of Gustavo's Long Island estate, surrounded by flowers Rosa had planted and friends she'd never expected to have. The wives and children of Gustavo's associates had welcomed her with surprising warmth, creating a community she'd never known she wanted. "Ready?" Gustavo appeared beside her, devastating in a charcoal suit, his silver-streaked hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ready," she confirmed, taking his offered arm. As they walked toward the altar, where Father Miguel waited to perform the ceremony, Flavia marveled at the unexpected turns her life had taken. A year ago, she'd been a struggling waitress, invisible to the world around her. Now she was about to become the wife of the most powerful man in the city, a woman respected and protected, beloved and cherished. "No regrets," Gustavo murmured as they took their positions. Flavia looked into his amber eyes, seeing the man who'd protected her grandmother, who'd built schools and hospitals, who'd shown her that love could be both gentle and fierce. "No regrets," she whispered back. As Father Miguel began the ceremony, Gaz Rosa dabbed happy tears from her eyes as the afternoon sun painted everything in golden light. Flavia Martinez became Flavia Romano, and in a world where fairy tales rarely came true, A waitress and a mob boss found their happily ever after through bullets and betrayal, loyalty and love.